last week in terms of what Janet Yellen was saying regarding the Federal Open Market Committee's deliberations. Seems like we're not going to be seeing interest rates in the US moving for quite some time. And I think that's really what gave the boost to emerging market currencies generally. And I think that's really what fed the rand. You know, I mean, I know a lot of observers have talked about what happened with the press conference on Friday from President Zuma and stuff like that. But to be honest, I think that was really a relatively peripheral type of thing as far as foreign investors are concerned. I think the much more interesting and important part of it would have been the general risk-on attitude that has come back, and even the strong jobs figures that you mentioned on Friday coming out of the US has done little to dent that.
So basically it's good for the rand when the US holds off on those interest rate hikes. What are the expectations right now, given that jobs data was stronger? What are we looking at for this year?
You know, it's interesting because the data has been quite patchy. If we had gone back to December, when Janet Yellen and her FOMC were really quite gung-ho about raising rates, we were looking at that point in time to 4 interest rate hikes of 25 basis points each. And that was very much the consensus out there. Now, well, should I say a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at maybe one in June, another one in December. And even that is starting to look a bit dicey now. Locally, we're still looking at 75 basis points in total during the course of this year, 25, 25 and 25 during the course of the year. And that in itself, I think, should help to bolster the rand, because as things currently stand, you know, we are offering foreign investors and speculators probably a bit more, albeit not a huge differential between what you're getting in interest rates here and inflation, because inflation is rising quite rapidly now, as evidenced by some of the figures that came out last week locally.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Could the rand be bolstered enough to help us with a big bugbear, which is inflation? Just looking at that huge petrol price hike that we're looking at this week.
Well, you mentioned the petrol price hike. That's just one of it. I think what is going to be part of the scene for most of the year, if not all the year, is the delayed impact of the drought. Now, we're looking at food inflation this year, probably peaking out somewhere about 11%. And we saw, for example, vegetables well into the 20s. If you look at that specific inflation rate for vegetables a couple of weeks ago. So I think that is unlikely to change materially. So I think the agricultural side is going to play a very, very important part as far as inflation is concerned. And our ability to get into that target range, the 3 to 6% target range during the course of this year, I think is very, very limited indeed, and probably only into next year sometime. So inflation is going to be a factor with which we're going to have to contend.
Problem. Chris, coming back to the rand, like you say, there's a lot of analysis on whether it's the United States or our internal politics. I see a lot of the international agencies are watching our internal politics. What extent is that playing out in the currency?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. If you chart the rand over the past couple of years, until December the 9th, it was actually going reasonably well. When I say reasonably well, I mean, it was weak, no doubt about it, but it wasn't nearly as weak, for example, as the Turkish lira, the Brazilian real, and one or two other emerging market currencies. And then, of course, we had Nenegate. So what I'm getting at, Francis, is we have this ability to bring into the equation our own idiosyncrasies. In other words, and I think that this is the internal politics to which you refer. I think if we can avoid the temptation to indulge in these in this internal politicking, and try and keep a straight and narrow path going, then I think we're likely not to fall foul of that kind of huge dent. If you look at the chart, what happened on December the 10th, I mean, the rand really just fell out of bed, and I think that weakness lasted right until about the middle of January. So we've been gradually clawing our way back, and thankfully, the press conference that the president gave on Friday has had little or no effect on the rand, and I think that's to be welcomed.
Let's get some more analysis on the direction